Welcome to the third in our three-part virtual excursions training program. My name's Jackie Randalls, and I've coordinated this program for national delivery as part of my role managing Inspiring Australia in New South Wales. For those new to Inspiring Australia, it's the national strategy for public engagement with STEM. We work with hundreds of community partners to connect scientific researchers to big audiences. And today's training is all about doing just that in the virtual world. It will be produced and delivered by Physics Education, Sydney Science Education, and Refraction Media. And I'd like to acknowledge support from the New South Wales Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer and Inspiring Australia's state programs in New South Wales, the ACT, Queensland, Western Australia, and South Australia.
All of us here are not just coming to grips with how we're going to present our own stuff, and I mean, honestly, there's a lot of us involved. Aligning with each other really brings power, not just to grants, but honestly to the public, to the customer themselves. I mean, I know I'm saying customer, they are, whether they pay or they don't, they're the ones consuming your content. So having that vibrancy does make a difference. And think a little bit about how you can go beyond traditional science, technology, engineering, maths. Think into the art world, into the cultural world. And I really wanted to have a chat with Mike about this because Mike Bartlett from Sydney Olympic Park Authority, whilst highly experienced in video conferencing, does do large festivals at Sydney Olympic Park. And as such, he's got, pivoting that whole world is quite interesting. So he'd have a bit to say. Mike, take it away. Oh, sorry, mate, you're muted. Go again.
We good?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Ben. And I just want to acknowledge from the outset, without making it the Ben show, that partnering in this space is all about capacity building. It's all about reciprocal kind of, we'll help you, you'll help us. And so, Ben, that video reminded me how you were there from the outset. When we first got our equipment, and tested the waters in this space, we were very nervous as an agency. So thank you. Karen also, and I know our friends from DART, the Department of Education, are in the background too, and they've been very helpful. But let me give you a couple of inspiring examples of the sort of thing that Ben was talking about. I remember, and you can search this up on YouTube, a thing called Croc Curriculum, where from the Royal Ag Society stables, we had a connection between an alligator farmer in Louisiana, a crocodile farmer in the Northern Territory. We had Fast Eddie cooking crocodile for a bunch of teachers locally doing a professional development exercise, which was a bit rough because we also had a live crocodile there with Australian wildlife. That's the kind of stuff you can do with video conferencing, really, really real, exciting, in-your-face kind of novel connections. We've had connections through our Youth Eco Summit, so outdoor sustainability festivals for young people, where we've brought in Vanuatu Indigenous groups doing sand drawing and us sharing culture with them also. We've had a virtual sports fest where we've had connections around the Asian Football Cup between schools here and schools in Korea, talking not just sport but culture as well. We've had Wally Masur out on the tennis courts sharing tips live. We've had Paralympians telling schools their stories of resilience, and we've had things just recently, like in November last year, we had a connection between our Indigenous youth through the Marama initiative, connecting to the Olympic Museum in Lausanne, having a look at Kathy Freeman's shoes there and talking about Indigenous athletes and just amazing stuff. So that inspires me, but it involves a lot of moving parts, and it involves people putting their trust in us as an agency, putting their brand against our brand. And there's a couple of things I just wanted to draw our attention to, just a quick cheat sheet, I guess, that I compiled from those experiences that I'd like to share with you. One of the key points for me is that before you embark on this, and we need to do this for our own self-confidence as well, we just got to test the connections to make sure that the technology, and acknowledge what Emma wrote in the chat there, we'll always have problems. We'll always be able to overcome them somehow, but do as much testing as you can to make your partners that you're involving in your connections feel comfortable. Secondly, I'd say that it's our job as I guess the anchor, the key provider, to cover off on things like policy, media permissions, child protection issues, and so on, so that those who are partnering with us have the confidence that we have done our job in making a safe environment, and just checking those boxes that we need to do what we do. I would say make sure when you're partnering with people that you do your best to share their channels, share your channels with them, and I'm talking about marketing channels. So you've both got a mutual responsibility to find that audience and to connect that audience. Sometimes it might be a group like ours brokering those connections with schools, but when you're talking about a wider public audience, you really both need to get your social channels working. You need to have your marketing groups really talking in sync with one another and doing a kind of a shared campaign. And Jackie will be able to share more with you around the National Science Week campaigns and just how effective they can be when people are working together. I would say that that those of us who are in communication roles exploit that to its fullest end. So someone like Ben, for instance, who is a communicator for a living, his job and many of our roles will be to facilitate, to MC those connections. So as providers connect with you, they're bringing in really rich content. Our job is to make it a comfortable experience, is to work on the flow and to structure it in such a way as they can get their messages through your channel. Everybody wins. I would also say that that you need to be mindful of the fact that we are carrying someone else's brand. So promote and protect someone's brand. Understand that people are putting their trust. They've often had to say to their senior executive, hey, yes, we can use this. We can be involved with this organisation. We can share our content, but also make sure that they get a shout out during that process so that their brand gets a bit of promo. I would suggest perhaps that you need to attend to things like metrics. So don't lose sight of a return on investment for those who are partnering with you. How many hits did you get on that? How many participants were in that? Often we concentrate so much on the substance, we forget on how to report on it, and that oils the wheel, those outcomes. So collect those and report on those. And lastly, I would say, particularly, and I saw Jeff there from CSIRO, an Indigenous STEM project. I'd love to talk to you at some stage, Jeff, but when you're dealing with things like Indigenous content, sacred content, you need to be very mindful of how you treat and value and share intellectual property, cultural property. So that's something just to be mindful of, where it goes, who it's going to, how you're treating it, how you value it in terms of payment and things like that. So, yep, that's my little spiel. I just wrote that on a tissue. And they're the top of mind things for me. So thanks for having me, and it's wonderful to be learning with you all.
Mike, we've got a question from Jasmine, if you don't mind answering it for us. Jasmine asks, have you faced issues working with students or communities who struggle to access reliable internet and devices to watch you on? If so, how have you overcome these challenges?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is a reality, I guess, of interactive video conferencing in its fullest form. So someone mentioned in the chat there H323, like the fully fledged systems. They can be a bit heavy on data and they can be a bit inaccessible for some groups. We have at times resorted to less interaction, if you like, a little bit like we're doing today, where it's more like a live stream. So we'd utilize something like YouTube. Live streaming, and then use the chat function for a connection. Things like Skype are very much lighter on the data, and so we've used a whole bunch of different platforms: Google Hangouts, Skype, Zoom, and then the full systems that we talked about before. The thing with video, we've talked about video, but let me tell you that the most important thing is audio. So you could, if you can't see me, as long as you can hear me, we're communicating. So I would say that at the end of the day, get creative, make sure that your audio is there. I know it sounds like just a phone call then, but in reality, you're still connected to that person. They're still hearing from you, and you can paint a word picture. So always have a backstop as far as your audio is concerned. How will we connect with this group if it all falls apart?
Claire also has a question. Can you talk through an example where a partnership was shaky or didn't get off to a good start? How did you get it back on track?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. And because we're on tape, I'll need to give you a pretty diplomatic answer. But let me tell you how partnerships can get off track. And that's where you have differing expectations as to what you're doing. So it's extremely important that you storyboard what you're doing before you get into the room. So you both understand what the aims are. In a curriculum-based sense, that's a lot easier because you've got that framework to fall on. When you're dealing with, well, let's just say players of a sport, to put it out there, as we often do at the park, you need to be mindful of their understandings of the audience and what's appropriate and so on. So I would say that that largely our role of facilitation of these kind of connections happens before the main game, happens before the connection itself. So that we say, what are our key messages? What are we really trying to achieve here? And what's going to make you happy to be involved? And what are we wanting from it? What does our audience expect? So the key is about communication. If things go off track from a participant behaviour perspective, pull the plug. You know, don't be afraid. Like if things are going south, it's much better than, oh, we've got technical difficulties. There's a bit of static. Sorry, we'll catch up with you next time. Yeah, Karen's got something to add there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. And I certainly do. The experience that you've brought to the table today is absolutely brilliant, and you've developed some amazing programs over the years. And I think when you're working with partnerships, just setting up that expectation of what you're all going to provide to the partnership and to the network, and what your outcomes are going to be. You know, we can't emphasize that enough. That is certainly really, really important. So great for sharing. And sometimes partnerships don't always go, and you have, in any relationship, you'll have some people that might, take a little bit more. But it's a matter of then, just building the relationships with the people that you continue to work with. And you will find that over time, there will be certain people that are your go-to partnership people. And that's because you know that you work well together, and that you all have a consistent idea of what your outcome will be. Thanks. Did you want to add anything there, Ben?
Oh no, sorry. I thought you actually summated that really well. To be honest,
do all the talking, Darren?
No, it is the case. Look, honestly, hats off. And Tori, I know that with the Australian Museum, what you're pulling together is it's not like it's your first rodeo. You guys have been doing this for a long time. It's just this online environment is going to be interesting. But then again, you've got a lot of people who want to play together. And so, Tori, any more you want to say about that?
Yeah, and I think just on working with partners, I think it's that long-term goal as well, what you want to achieve and what you can help learn from each other as you're looking to the future. And for this year, we're hoping that the digital side is just the start of a really great partnership. We're hoping next year we're going to have the bar raised even higher to have things on-site and digital and connecting that experience all together. But it's that long-term relationship as well is really important, and figuring out, yes, as you guys have all just said really well, that you've got the same kind of overarching goal and understanding what you can all bring to the table and what you want to get out of it.
Now, one thing I want to throw out there, and this is total hats off to the Inspiring Australia state programs, they're your friends. They're the people you should be reaching out to, because they're the ones that know lots of people doing lots of cool things. They can break down silos. That's what they're there for. Mike, you work in a very large organisation. I mean, it's the heart of Sydney in a lot of ways. It's a massive site. It's got its own postcode, as Sydney Levy Clark does. So, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, you have to work with the very large organisations right through to the smaller groups. Now, Heather and I talk from a experience from being a small group dealing with large sites. What about the other way? How does it work for you?
Yeah, well, so you're talking about how we would connect nationally, Ben, or sorry, just... Yeah,
just the connecting nationally with multiple groups of different sizes, considering how large your organisation is. And it's not like you've got one project, you've got bucket loads, heaps of them. So I just sort of wonder, how does it sort of working with multiple user groups? What are your experiences with just dealing with different needs of different organisations, different ways? Probably a very broad question, I must admit, and probably put you on the spot a little bit.
Look, there's two examples I could give you. One would be, the fact is we're a state government agency that has a place responsibility that is around that postcode 2127 really, and yet if we were to be insular and only deal with that world, then no one would want to partner with us because it's a much greater world in which we live. So we do partnering with the likes of, I saw Heather McDonald in the background there, reach out to Heather around some connections, Heather from Education Partnerships with the AOC. AOC is a national group, of course, and yet we're Olympic Park. So we've got this really obvious connection, and yet we've got a state or even a local focus, whereas someone like Heather has a national a focus with athletes all around the country. So I guess going back to our original points, understanding what expectations of reach there may be, and also in a technical sense, it's understanding what sort of systems are used by the groups that like for instance, the Queensland education system are using different platforms than we might want to be using here. Also, in Heather's case, you've got athletes that are dealing with primary schools, athletes in New South Wales that are dealing with secondary schools, and so the way that they roll out their programs can be very diverse. So I think what I would say to that is that we need to give a little bit in terms of our aims. We need to broaden our aims slightly to meet people in the middle, so that we're not going, well, look, it's just how you can benefit me. It's how can I benefit you also? And I think there's a lot to be gained by shared branding. Like we've done a lot with the Australian Museum over time. Australian Museum, what an awesome brand. Sydney Olympic Park's got an iconic brand as well. And so it's about sharing that brand, being a little bit open with your brand as well to benefit others. I'm not sure that that's answered your question, Ben, but yeah, there's just some reflections.
You did answer my question. Karen's got something to add.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for that from that big organisation perspective. And from the Australian Museum, I was in that aspect as well, and it was nice to be able to sort of encourage small people and help sort of support that. And I'm completely the other side of the fence now as a small organisation, and I just wanted to sort of mirror some of Mike's comments just in terms of different platforms that different states are using. From my perspective and Virtual Excursions Australia, we kind of want to break down those borders, and that's really exciting, but we do need to remember that different states and have different governance, different technology, and those things do need to be considered. So I think that combination between small organisation and big organisation, those partnerships are absolutely brilliant, and especially when they can help break down some of the state national boundaries as well. So it can be a really wonderful combination to help support the big and the small. So the flexibility that some of the small organisations have that are a little bit more agile in some ways, and some large organisations. So there's some really great balances that can be made by looking across national, state, small, large audiences. So yeah, thank you for adding that, Mike.
I'll just a follow up there, Karen. If you take some of the things that we do in National Science Week, those larger organisations that tend to create the festivals or within that, or the larger events, that's actually creating a landscape in which NGOs, startups, some really rich content can have an open door to play, and without us being able to set up the infrastructure, whether in our case it might be Canvas, it might be marquees, but in this context it's digital infrastructure. It's being able to create those pathways. Without us kind of helping, we would lose out on so much rich content. So I think I'm getting a bit more towards what you were saying there, Ben, but some of the smaller organisations have amazing stuff to offer, and so we just need to, create an open door, provide a platform, provide the data in some cases, provide a video conferencing room, which is available for people to use at Sydney Olympic Park if they want. So, yeah.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's brilliant, and just so true that it is that support that you get across organisations that can be so useful. I think Jackie's got some questions.
Yep, we've got 2 questions. The first one from Leanne. How do organizations manage the challenges or drivers of partnering with other institutions or organizations with different business models? So, for example, government, not-for-profits, or commercial.
Excellent. I think we've touched on that a little bit as well, that there are certainly, you need to go into those partnerships and understanding, and even Heather mentioned it in terms of international, relationships are different to sometimes the sort of looser arrangements. So really setting up those expectations are really the great place to start about what the purpose of the relationship and the partnership are.
Thank you for joining us for the Virtual Excursions training, supported by Inspiring Australia. You can find more information and top tips on the Virtual Excursions Australia website.